Lei è Head of International Development and Communities, ha oltre 20 anni di esperienza nel settore del volontariato, ha sviluppato tanti programmi nazionali focalizzati sulle comunità, coordina progetti di sviluppo internazionale e una varietà di premi per il sociale nel Regno Unito e in Europa all'interno del Challenge Prize, Challenge Prize Center del Nesta UK. Welcome Constance Agyeman. Welcome. And I really like the quotation that was taken from you here, where you say innovation is a collaborative, action-oriented commitment to disrupting the world for the betterment of communities and society. That's very inspiring to begin with.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, I hope I can continue with that.
Yes, please.
So it's a great pleasure to be here. I have quite a bit to cover in the next 10 minutes or so. And it's a real pleasure to be able to be in Turin and to be talking to you about innovation. So as has been said, I work with Nesta, the UK Innovation Foundation, which also has Nesta Italia counterparts. And I work specifically for the Challenge Prize Centre. So we set social challenges, look for issues that need some specific focus and attention, and inspire innovators to find solutions to work in that space. But what I want to talk to you generally about, seeing as this is the kind of start of this next 2 days of a wealth of information around innovation and an exploration of specific projects and ideas, I want to talk to you more generally about my experience of innovation and what I think it takes to inspire innovation and succeed in innovation. We have a number of different pathways that we take to innovation. We can look at this first diagram and kind of see elements that are broken, that we want to fix. And we can go ahead and rush into that and try and fix those things very quickly. But often we find that they're not stable then, they don't have a solid foundation. We also have an innovation spiral that kind of looks from the point of the start of ideation all the way through to systemic change and looking for where innovation can happen in that chain. But again, it's a very linear approach to innovation. Yes, there is a pathway that can take you through there, but often when you're looking at it in that very simplistic way, you miss a number of different things. And I think for the reality for a lot of us is that this is what innovation really looks like. It's messy, it's complicated, there are many facets and layers to it. We're trying to deal with complicated issues. We're trying to find new solutions to a number of different elements within an issue, not just one specific thing. So I think for me, the diagram here that shows the colors and the connections is actually the more accurate kind of reflection of what innovation is. It's about connections, it's about putting together lots of different pieces to really inspire the type of change that we need to tackle the issues in the way that we need to tackle them. So why do we innovate? There are lots of different reasons for innovating, particularly in development. We see needs, we see issues that need solving. We want better equality and access. We want to help communities, we want to empower communities to have better opportunities, to gain better footholds on the issues that are really affecting them. And so there's a whole range of different things that we're trying to approach and tackle when we look at innovation. I think the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, kind of frame the issues that we're looking at in development in a very neat kind of package, but we know that they're not all boxed in that way. But it gives us a good framing. It gives us a good context for some of the issues and some of the ways in which we might be able to talk about impact. But ultimately, as I said, why we innovate is about communities. It's about people. It's about trying to improve quality of life. It's trying to improve access. It's trying to provide a more equal footing for the communities that we want to serve. So there are a number of different approaches to innovation, and we talk about tech innovation, and ultimately we're looking at kind of social parameters in development for innovation. But I just wanted to use this example of the iPhone. When we think about innovation, we're always thinking about something new, that we have to develop something new. But actually, when you think about great innovation, it's actually about adaptation and responding to a different type of need. So when you look at this iPhone, when this was developed, this wasn't a completely new premise. We already had mobile phones, we already had computers, we already had music streaming. What was innovative about this product was essentially the way it was put together. Steve Jobs recognized that we were starting to encourage a whole range of different personal devices. And actually, the beauty of the iPhone is the combination, and the smartphone is the combination of bringing all of those things together in a really beautifully designed device. And that's what innovation really should be about. I think sometimes when we're looking at innovation, we're kind of thinking about the new all the time. We're thinking that things have to be created. And we forget the things that have been there, that have been working, that have been based in communities already, and not thinking about how do you really adapt those to work more effectively? How do you build on those to work more effectively? Unfortunately, social innovation doesn't just look like the iPhone, where you can put a few pieces together and you have, voila, a beautiful product, and there you go, it's going to solve everything for you. This is what social innovation really looks like. It's going back to the kind of simple premise of there are so many different facets and elements to what we're trying to achieve with social innovation. And I think the reason why this diagram to me means so much is because it means we have to start to think about how we get creative with putting all those elements together. How do we really co-create and co-design with the communities that we're trying to serve? How do we draw in the right types of partnerships and collaborations to make that happen? How do we think not just about the finances, but the capabilities that are required to sustain whatever it is that we're trying to have a positive impact on? There are so many different facets and elements that sometimes that's why it gets really complicated. But I think it's about just being able to connect the dots more effectively and thinking about it in a more holistic way rather than in a linear sphere. I think in the step process for inspiring innovation, it's really about some key foundational elements. Understanding the issue. I think sometimes we rush headlong into seeing a situation and wanting to fix it and wanting to just go out there and do something, which is admirable on the one hand. But actually understanding the complexities of the issue is a really important thing. It's about kind of knowing what's going on in the situation, understanding what solutions are already out there, understand how communities are affected by the issue, understand who's already putting value or finances or building capabilities around that, to understand where the gaps and the opportunities and the challenges really lie. It's about then striving for a purpose. Really being clear about where it is you can have an impact. I think sometimes we talk about impact as if we're going to solve the whole issue. You know, we look at an urban sanitation chain and think we are going to be able to fix everything. Whereas actually, if we may be focused on one element of that, we'd be able to have more of an impact on the whole value chain and the whole system because we've tried to focus our attention a bit more readily. I think it's useful to have an eye towards systemic change. Where does what I'm doing fit into the whole sense of creating systemic change? Who do I need to work with? Who do I need to collaborate with? Where in the value chain do I need to draw on other inspirations to be able to do that? And I think collectively in that step process, that's when we start to have a bit more traction and understand the value of innovation. Mobile money is a good example of innovation that's context-specific, because I think one of the other things that we forget around innovation is it needs to be context-specific. One thing might work in one place, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in the same way in another area. And therefore, we would have thought about the banking systems in developing contexts in the same way as we do in Western societies. you have your traditional banking institutions, and people are supposed to go and find those, or you'll have those on every high street, or whatever else it is. It doesn't work in that way. The societies and communities are not built in that way in developing contexts, and therefore a mobile money system is what actually replaced the traditional institution banking system. And in that context, you're then able to open up a whole range of other opportunities. So being context specific and being context focused, I think, is a highly important element of innovation as well. But none of this happens in isolation, and not one institution or one funder or one group is going to be able to do this all on their own, to have the type of level of impact for the intractable issues that are required. And therefore, having collaboration that understands where the strengths and opportunities are within the collaborators that you have to really strengthen what it is you're doing and have a better sense of impact around what you're doing is really, really key. Understanding where people are placed within that, what their strengths are, what they bring to the table, I think it is a real value in collaboration. And it's tricky, it's not easy. Collaboration is never that easy. Everyone's got different things that they're thinking about, different agendas and everything else. But ultimately, this is where you're going to see the most change. So just one very quick example of this. We delivered the Fall Armyworm Tech Prize for USAID's Feed the Future program. And ultimately, we were looking for digital tools to help smallholder farmers deal with and understand when the pest of fall armyworm, how it could be dealt with. There was a real devastating kind of sweep of fall armyworm across Africa, as there is in many other parts of the world. But what we were realizing was the information wasn't necessarily getting to farmers in the way that they needed to be able to identify and deal with. So we wanted to, first of all, raise awareness of the issue, then think about how you focus digital solutions that can be in the hands of farmers. But in order to do that, we also had to co-create with farmers and extension services and make sure those solutions were not done in isolation. But the main point that I wanted to talk about was that it was a collaboration. So there are a whole number of organizations that were involved in this challenge prize because we understood that we needed the type of expertise around agriculture. We needed to be able to support the innovators that came up with those digital solutions with incubation support, with finance, with expert advice from other entrepreneurs that were working in the field, with communications advice, with really understanding how to co-design and co-create with those farmers. We couldn't have done that by ourselves, and so we wanted to make sure from the very start of that process that we had a strong partnership of organizations that were able to really support those innovators to take their early stage ideas into something that would be market ready, and then hopefully hand those over to other investors. What we wanted to be able to do with the likes of Land Over Lakes and Foundation for Food and Agriculture Security is actually talk about future investment, not just the life of the prize itself, but how do you continue to sustain those ideas? How do you continue to take it beyond the life of the prize that we were delivering? That was a really important factor for us. So just to come back onto the points around collaboration. There are plenty of opportunities, I think, to draw on each other's strengths, to bolster each other's weaknesses, to think about how do you really put the pieces together and have different approaches that are focused around the same issues. You're greater together, but that doesn't come without its challenges, as I said. There are lots of different bureaucracies around organizations working together in that they'll have different processes, different methods, different agendas, and sometimes those things are difficult to challenge. But ultimately, what you want to be able to do is come to an agreement about what is this ultimately about? What is it that we want to achieve? I believe from that point, if you understand what the impact is that you want to have and the ultimate goal, then you should be able to work together to move outside of the bounds of the bureaucracies of your organizations and really think about what's needed to tackle that issue and really champion that within a collaborative framework by convening organizations, really taking in their perspectives, experience and knowledge, and really understanding what it is that's driving and motivating them to do something about the particular issue. I know time is getting short now, so I'm going to whiz through very quickly. I'm getting there. So, in terms of incentivizing innovation, I think it's about blended approaches, just in the same way that we talked about collaboration being about different organizations coming together. I think the incentivizing innovation is about understanding that it's just not about finances. It's about capabilities, it's about policy, it's about all sorts of other things that you need to take into account. And if you can find the right leverage for the people that are working on that project, then I think you can actually kind of create success. The Global Innovation Fund was just an example of how a number of organizations have come together to work outside of their organization's frameworks to actually come to an ultimate goal, and they're working quite successfully to do that. So, very quickly, impact. I think sometimes where the stumbling block is organizations want to tell a very different story about impact or own the impact that they say they have on a particular issue. So really, as part of that collaborative process, agreeing on what the story is, agreeing on what you consider success, and framing that in a way that makes sense to all of those organizations, I think is really key. Thinking about what it means to the individual, what it means locally, what it means regionally, really being able to tell that story around the innovation impact, I think is key. And more importantly to me, it's how can that impact be sustained? We're constantly trying to innovate and create new things, but what we're not necessarily doing very well is scaling, replicating, and sustaining those projects in the longer term. So ultimately, what we're all striving towards is better communities with equality of access and opportunity. And that's what we should be working towards, and that's what we should bear in mind when we're collaborating and thinking about innovation. Thank you.
Thank you.